All right, let's dive into an incredible story about facing down terror. It comes from the autobiography of William O. Douglas, and it's this powerful journey from being paralyzed by fear to finding total freedom. And it all starts with the powerful lesson he learned at the very end. So we're actually going to start where his journey ends, with this profound realization. This wasn't just some idea he had. It was a conclusion he earned through a pretty harrowing experience that haunted him for most of his life. And honestly, this one idea is the key to his entire story. To really understand how he got to that conclusion, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. We need to see how a simple fear of water just spiraled into this all-consuming phobia. So Douglas's fear of water started really early, on a beach in California. He was just a toddler, maybe 3 or 4, and a wave completely knocked him over. Now his father just laughed, but for Douglas, that feeling of the water's immense power planted the seed of terror in him. Years later, he decides he's going to face that fear at the local YMCA pool. But that's where a so-called misadventure would turn this small childhood fear into an absolute monster. You know, the irony here is just striking. His mother was always warning him about the Yakima River, telling him how treacherous it was, filling his head with stories of people drowning. But the thing that changed his life didn't happen in the place everyone thought was dangerous. No, it happened in the one place that was supposed to be totally safe, the YMCA pool. So now we get to the incident itself. A moment of just casual, thoughtless cruelty that almost cost him his life and plunged him into a kind of terror that he would never, ever forget. So picture this. He's 10, maybe 11 years old, just waiting by himself at the pool. And in walks this big bruiser of a boy, probably 18, built like an ox. And he just yells, "Hi, skinny," picks Douglas up and chucks him into the 9-foot deep end, just for a laugh. As he was sinking, his mind, surprisingly, was pretty logical. He wasn't freaking out, not yet anyway. He actually had a plan. He'd hit the bottom, push off with everything he had, and shoot up to the surface like a cork. But on that terrifying trip down, those 9 feet felt more like 90. But of course, that's not how it works. He didn't pop up like a cork at all. He came up so slowly. He opened his eyes, and all he could see was this gross yellow water. His hands were grabbing at nothing. He couldn't breathe. And that's when the logical plan just evaporated, and pure panic started to kick in. And this is the core of the whole experience. It wasn't just being scared. He calls it stark terror. It's this primal, uncontrollable force that just completely paralyzed him. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. His arms and legs were just stiff, rigid. His mind was screaming, but his body was like a statue made of fear. And then, as he's sinking for a 3rd time, something really strange happens. The struggle just stops. The terror disappears. He describes this peaceful, drowsy feeling like he was being carried in his mother's arms. He just let go. And as he puts it, the curtain of life fell. He just blacked out. Now, he was pulled out and saved, but the boy who walked home that day was a different person. That trauma would cast this long, dark shadow over his life for years and years to come. And this wasn't just about being afraid of swimming pools. No, this phobia followed him absolutely everywhere, and it stole the simple joys from his life. It wrecked fishing trips in New Hampshire and Oregon. It meant no canoeing, no boating. Anytime he got near water, that icy horror would just grip his heart. It was a constant, paralyzing handicap. Finally, after years of this, he decided enough was enough. He was absolutely determined to conquer this fear. So one October, he hired an instructor and started this slow, really difficult process of learning to swim, piece by painstaking piece. The approach his instructor took was honestly brilliant. For weeks, he just had Douglas swim back and forth with a safety rope attached. Then they spent ages practicing breathing, hundreds of times. Then weeks just kicking at the side of the pool until his legs, which used to just freeze up in fear, finally started to listen to him. The instructor literally built a swimmer out of him, one tiny piece at a time. So come April, the instructor says, "You can swim." But Douglas knew the job wasn't really done. I mean, learning the mechanics of swimming is one thing. Conquering the terror? That's a whole different battle. And he knew he had to face that part alone. His first move was to swim the length of the pool by himself. And whenever those tiny vestiges of the old terror would creep back in, he learned to talk back to it. He'd actually frown and say to the fear, "Trying to scare me, eh? Well, here's to you." And then he'd swim another length. He was finally fighting back. But, the pool wasn't the real test. He had to prove to himself, once and for all, that he was the one in charge now. So he took the fight to open water. He swam 2 miles across Lake Wentworth. Then he went out west and camped by Warm Lake. This was it. This was the final gauntlet. And this is the moment of triumph. In the middle of Lake Wentworth, he puts his face in the water and sees nothing but black, bottomless water below him. And that old feeling starts to come back. But instead of panicking, he laughed. He actually taunted his fear, talking right to it. And in that moment of defiance, the terror just fled, and he swam on. His final, ultimate victory came at Warm Lake. He dove in, swam all the way across and back again. And as he stood on the shore, he just let out this massive shout of pure joy, and the mountains echoed it right back at him. It was like the world itself was confirming it. He had done it. He had conquered his fear completely. So what's the bigger lesson that Douglas took away from this incredible experience? Well, it's about so much more than just learning how to swim. It's really about the nature of fear itself. He finally, truly understood what his friend, President Roosevelt, meant by that famous line. Because he had lived it. He knew firsthand that the actual sensation of dying was peaceful, but the fear of dying, that was absolute terror. The enemy was never death. It was always the fear. And this points to the central paradox of his whole journey. Because he had faced death, because he'd known that paralyzing terror and had actually beaten it, his will to live became more powerful and more intense than ever before. In the end, this was never really about conquering water. It was about reclaiming his life. He finally felt released from this psychological prison that had held him for so long. He was free to live his life without that shadow hanging over him, free to really embrace the world. Douglas's story is just an incredible testament to the human will. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest freedom we can ever find is waiting for us on the other side of our deepest fears. And that leaves us with a simple but pretty powerful question to think about for ourselves. Thanks for joining this explainer.